Hello, and welcome to Trying Times. My name is Carmen. I'm a creative who enjoys all things arts related, and that's all I got for my intro slash elevator pitch today, okay? So, welcome. If you've never been here before, this is basically a show that talks all about some of the things that we all just kind of happen to experience in life. Like a lot of different subjects or concepts that we all just sort of happen to live through. And as I discuss those, I might toss in some embarrassing moments and memories from my own experiences, because without those, I would not be able to call any time a trying time. And basically, what I just did there, what you just got, was an elevator pitch. And that's basically the only way I thought to introduce myself at the beginning of each and every episode. And also, I just thought it was like a fun little practice. Anyways, moving on. I don't know, I'm just rambling here. This is the 10th episode, which is crazy. Like, that's so cool and exciting to say. We've officially hit the double digits, and that makes me very happy and very proud. It's kind of funny listening back to my first few episodes because I can tell I was kind of like quieter and awkward and didn't know like what sounded right, what didn't sound right. Like I was putting a little too much pressure on myself, whereas now I'm just kind of like, no, you know what? I think I've got a flow. I'm gonna go with this. I'm just gonna see how it sounds, and that's that. And that's basically what I wanted this show to be. I've said in previous episodes that this is kind of like a fun conversation I like to have. The premise of this all is almost like you're having a conversation where you're catching up with a friend on the phone, and you guys just talk about some embarrassing things that have happened, or just like ramble. That's essentially what this platform right here kind of is, for me at least. And if this is not your first time listening ever, thank you so much for coming back, by the way. For real, that means a lot, and I like talking to you. So yeah, let's keep this conversation going. Got all that out of the way, and today we have a pretty big one. Today, I want to talk a bit more about something that I find myself struggling with often, and seemingly a lot of people my age do struggle with this too. I want to talk about the whole concept of productivity. Productivity? Oh my god, why am I saying it weird? Productivity. I don't know. That sucks because I'm going to have to say it a lot in this episode, and I know I'm just saying it weird. I feel like I'm saying it weird. I don't know why. Anyways, so I want to talk about the whole concept of productivity. Oh god. Productivity. Productive. Productivity. Okay, whatever. We're just going to go with it. So I want to talk about the whole concept of productivity and how we've sort of grown into this culture of counteracting laziness in every working and waking moment of our lives. I say working specifically for a very good reason that I'll touch on heavily in this episode. It's pretty exhausting, obviously, ironically, but legitimately too. I mean, I think the way in which we look at productivity, God, it's going to piss me off every time I have to say it. So I think the way that we look at productivity and then place that so heavily into the forefront of everything we do and so frequently is extremely unhealthy in a mental way, an emotional way, and a physical way. Like in some ways, we're setting ourselves up to be this very productive person, to be very successful, but in a lot of other aspects in our life, we're kind of totally missing the mark and draining ourselves. And I think there's a fine line between the two. So what I really want to get into is like just how we're often surrounded by so many different forms of media specifically. So videos or photos or infographics, like those types of posts all over social media. And I feel like especially Instagram, that focuses on this incredible lifestyle that some live, and all by consistently hustling or being this boss type of figure in their own lives. And so what that does is paint a picture of what all of us need to be doing in our own lives in hopes of achieving some of that status and lifestyle. Let's say you follow a creator or influencer on Instagram who has a lot of followers. Already to someone, that is very tempting and intriguing, I think, because many people already mistake this thing of someone having followers or a following for meaning that they also have every other aspect of life figured out, which is not always true. Someone who has 1 million followers could very well still be figuring out who they are and what they want and where they want to be and literally all of those things. And really all that number means is that they have to face all those everyday mundane things in front of an audience rather than maybe just in front of themselves and their family and their friends. So it's like if you're asking a friend for advice in a way, and you're going to someone you really trust and you've known, let's say, for a while, or maybe not a while, but this is someone that you know you can really trust, it's interesting because you're going to obviously take everything that they say to heart. I imagine for a lot of these individuals, like, it's hard because they have to start to take everything with a grain of salt, not from those around them that they love. Maybe, maybe not, I don't know. I can't speak for anyone. But they have all these sort of different forms of input being tossed at them, like from every angle on their social media, like through their phone, through everyday life, like when they're out and about. Like, it's just crazy for me to think about. I can't imagine what that feels like. So while they're doing that and learning more about themselves and learning about what they want in life and who they are, they also, in a way, have to kind of conceal themselves. And I mean, maybe there's tons of creators that don't, and they're very honest and upfront about what's going on in their lives. And I think that's really wonderful. And then there's also a group of people that, you know, aren't very open about that. And I think that's really wonderful too, because it's hard to broadcast everything happening in your life to, I can't imagine that many people. So a lot of the time, like, that's just so overwhelming, or it must be at least, because like they're just trying to live life and make it through one day at a time, in addition to their job, which just so happens to be very, very closely knitted with their life. And that's just like, I can't imagine that. So when we remember the fact that anyone seemingly of a quote unquote higher status is still struggling with very normal things, that kind of reminds us that this doesn't mean they are by any means living a different idea of life altogether. I say that kind of as a question. Yes, I think in many ways they are living a lavish life, but the main point here is that we do not see every single thing behind the scenes, which is very much still a real life, no matter who the person is. I think, I don't know, I think there's specific people that are like pretty big figures, or pretty big public figures, I should say, who, I don't know, they're a little off. I could be wrong. I don't know. But all in all, it's just this thing of like, when we kind of strip that whole image down to its bare bones, we can begin to easily assess how this type of living is not in any way what it's cracked up to be. And I don't think that's like a bad thing by any means. I think that's fine. Like I said, anyone living in that kind of like a public eye situation, like that can't be easy. And so, yeah, I think, I don't know, the way that someone chooses to handle that is totally a personal preference. Obviously, I'm not anyone to be like, oh my God, you should be telling everyone everything, or don't tell anyone anything. I think like however someone decides to go about that is totally right for them. Anyways, back to the topic. I went off on like a huge tangent. I know like a week ago, again, I'm recording this in March, so you'll be hearing this a bit from now. And I'm sure when I'm saying what I'm about to say, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about, even if you're listening to this months from now. But so about a week ago, there was a video of the Kardashians that went viral, where Kim is basically talking about how people often complain about how they don't want to work, but want to be successful, and then basically just said this gist of like, you need to get up off your ass and work to be anything. So that was the thing. Take that how you may. I'm trying to not be biased right now. People had a very mixed reaction to this video from what I saw online. Some said that they agree and believe that the points made by the Kardashians, or by Kim particularly, were, I guess, like a nice reminder. You can hear my bias in my tone there. And a lot of others believed that it was total and utter, pardon my language, bullshit. In my opinion, I disagree with it very heavily, in case that wasn't already obvious by my tone. I think it reinforces this toxic style of productivity where someone who is a normal person, like lower to middle class, you know, thinks that, okay, if I listen to what these people are saying, who are, I don't even know if I would call them high class, I would call them like something above that, because like I said, their style of living, I feel, is very different, and I don't see it for the bare bones. I know at the end of the day, they're just people, but obviously their work ethic is very different from an average person's work ethic, I think. And that's not to say that's a bad thing. It's just, I get this vibe from the whole video where I feel like if there's someone out there who really, really looks up to that family or to Kim Kardashian and strives to be on that same ladder of success, that they have now this false pretense. And hey, like, I can't be one to judge. Maybe they'll do something and they'll blow up and, like, you know, be able to make incredible funds and just do absolutely anything and everything they've dreamt of in their lives. And that's great. But I think in a lot of ways, it sets a lot of very normal people like myself up to think that if they just turn on and refuse to stop, that they can too live this life just like the Kardashians or, again, anyone else of a higher status for that matter. And so I have a lot of thoughts going into this about this video. Without a doubt, working hard towards your goals is bound to help you in one way or another. That's going to help you. And I think whether that's the end result of how that helps you or the things like lessons that you learn along the way, those help you. Like it's always something helping you. But so there's that. And then in a lot of other ways, refusing to take a second to stop can severely assist in creating this feeling of resentment towards yourself. Because you could look back in many years, or even when you're much older, and then see one or two things. One, your accomplishments, or two, how much of life has gone by. And maybe not in that exact order, but you'll be able to look back at those accomplishments and feel proud, or maybe even feel a little bit like you could have done more. And that is what I think this toxic hustle culture informs and does for many, because it's like setting up this thing of just, you can be anything you want. By any means, you absolutely can. But there's like a whole saying of work smarter, not harder. And I don't think that applies to every single thing, but I do think in some ways working smarter isn't necessarily cutting corners like a lot of people may perceive it. I think working smarter means learning what works for you. And if that means working like 60 hours on a passion project a week, if not more, is what works for you, then that's wonderful. But at the same time, it's just reinforming what that work and life balance is for you. And maybe work is everything to you, and that's great. But it's also good to know when to pull the plug a little bit and step back. And that's not to say everything comes crumbling down, everything stops. But it's to say that you can breathe for a second and things will still be okay. Life keeps moving. It's not just going to all freeze in time. So there's that. And then the second point I mentioned of looking at how much life has gone by isn't to say that you spent life working and didn't get to live. Because you can do both and also be content with that, kind of like what I just said. But I think in a way you could, again, compare that timestamp to your accomplishments. And that's something that everyone is a little guilty of. So when you're always looking to set goals or achieve something, it can be a thing we do without even really thinking about too much. So for my own example, I personally in the past had set goals I didn't even fully realize, where I was like, I want to do this before the age of 30 or this before I'm 20. And that sets up this really weird definition of either success or disappointment in your mind and towards yourself, most importantly. So, in some ways, that resentment or lower confidence if something doesn't work out can hit very hard. And that can just be so unhealthy and also very deteriorating, I think. So, in addition to those points, there's like this huge thing with deeming yourself unsuccessful as well. So success can easily be this comparative thing. And I bring up the example of creators or influencers again because I think this is the most frequent and like major example that I can think of right now that a lot of us use in our everyday lives. So it's so easy to point someone out online who could be the same age as you and be like, damn, I'm nowhere near that level, or that sucks, like I haven't done anything like this before. And it's kind of like, yeah, no kidding. Not a lot of us have been there. And like, that's very much okay. And I think as the whole role of a creator and an influencer becomes more and more popular, there are so many more doors being opened and so many more possibilities as to what that job could entail that never existed before. And like what a creator might have had access to 10 years ago is totally different, I think, from what they have access to now. Like it just kind of keeps opening up and unraveling and becoming this bigger and bigger thing. And like that's really cool because to be able to see that as a job, as like an actual job and career path, rather than just hearing, oh, like this person got to do this, is so cool at the end of the day. So not to ridicule anyone doing anything of that sort, I think that's amazing. And I think easily seeing that now and how it's actually becoming a viable job option and career path, like I said, it is very easy to look at that and be like, oh, why am I not doing that? Or, oh my God, this person's also 25. Why haven't I done this yet? And that's when like the gears kind of start going. You kind of got to step back and be like, hold up, this is not my life, and that you kind of have to create that separation. So another thing I think a lot of people may not consider is the work that could go into that kind of a job, or a lot of creative jobs for that fact. I think working in a creative industry, I'm so glad to say that I get to, is amazing. And at the same time, there is so much beneath the surface that a lot of us don't realize, and it isn't really fun. It's not as fun as saying, like, I work in a creative industry, or I work in this, or I work in that sounds. Like a lot of other things, sometimes jobs aren't meant to be a joyride. And that doesn't mean that anything with the word creative in it differs from this. There's a massive difference going off of that between creativity as an outlet versus creativity as a career. So, don't get me wrong, I'm over the moon that I had the opportunity to choose a creative field to study in school, and then on top of that, now have the chance to build a career that means so much to me in a field that I aspire to be a part of. But it doesn't totally differ from other careers at the end of the day. You still work a job, and is that job cool? Yes, absolutely, but it is still a job. So there's still the ups, there's still the downs, there's still everything that a normal job would have. Also, going off of that whole point I made of there's a difference between creativity as an outlet and there's a difference between creativity as a career. I think in so many ways there's wonderful overlap. So, for instance, a career in film, that starts from someone's passion, that starts from someone's, ideas, and someone created this really wonderful storyline. And that sort of an example I think is wonderful because it overlaps, and I love that. That's what makes me really proud to be in a creative industry and feel very grateful for where I'm at. And so I work in like a mesh of media. So I do a little bit of online work / social media kind of management and coordination, a little bit of film and TV production, and some other things that fall under both of those categories. So I find a lot of the time that some of my hobbies begin to overlap with what I do for work. And at some point earlier this year, when I realized that, I kind of froze up and was like, this is kind of weird. Is it normal for this to connect? And in some ways, sometimes it can pull away from the hobby a little bit. And so that's a thing that happens. And like, that's okay. I'm learning very much that that's okay. It's no surprise that like I get to enjoy my job because something I might consider a hobby is part of it. But then at the same time, when you're like focusing on your hobby and you're not focusing on the job aspect of it and just doing something because you want to and you enjoy it, it kind of like flips itself on the head a little and you're like, oh wait, this feels weird. Like, because it feels like I'm working, but I'm not. And so that's a whole other subject that like I kind of want to get into, maybe another episode or maybe later. I don't know. We'll see. So even just sharing there what my job is, that isn't a definite one title kind of thing. And that too is something that I racked my brain over for many years, like many years. And God, is that ever exhausting? But I'm also learning that that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. That's also a learning process. I know a lot of people early on in life know exactly what they want to do for life, and some people don't have a clue. And I like to think I'm somewhere in the middle, like a happy medium of both. I know what I want, but as I grow and I learn, it sort of like adds other things into the mix, and that's okay. So I start to lean more towards one thing or department or this or just generally, and I think that's nice because I get to learn and just do as I go, which is cool. And then on the other hand, some people really like to make a life plan or like those plans where it's like, where do I see myself in 5 years? And I think that's amazing. Like, I think that's wonderful that you can do that for yourself, but it also is not the thing for me. I want to preface that before I say the next thing. I find it horrifying. I find it terrifying. And a lot of people have asked me before, like, if I've made one or if I do that. And for the longest time, I actually started to feel guilty about that because I was like, why don't I do that? Oh, right, because I find that horrifying and it kind of makes me feel almost a little nauseous because it's just overwhelming. So, like, not to say that I don't know what's next, but I don't know what's next. I'm kidding, by the way, fully. I'm just like throwing everything up to the odds and I'm like, all right, let's see where this goes. So, going off that, one thing I know is that life changes in an instant. The first time I got the opportunity to work on a feature film, I found out 2 weeks prior to and moved across the country by myself and started the job literally right after I found out. Like, I was like, okay, I gotta pack, I gotta do this, I gotta go, I gotta get like my passport ready, I gotta leave. And I was off. And I think when I reflect on that alone, it was such a cool experience. And like, I think back on it, I'm like, how did I do that? But sometimes creating a concrete plan isn't necessarily right for everyone. And it isn't for me in many ways because I like to have a general goal so I can try what I wish and continue to learn and grow in that way. And also, again, if I set a plan that's very specific to a T, then I just feel like I'm setting myself up for a bit of disappointment if I don't do exactly what I have planned on paper. And that's just how I see it. So I also like to think of it in a way of me being open to opportunities and growing with change because I like my comfort zone. I've talked about that on here before, and I think if I made a plan for me and looked at that on paper and was like really instilling it in myself, like, this is what I'm going to do, this is what I'm going to do, I'm not allowing myself to be open to other things. And that's just how I function. That's not how everyone is, but that's just how I am. So that's something that used to give me a lot of anxiety. And honestly, it still makes me nervous, but I think that's just part of life and learning to go with the flow. And a big reason I like to do this with myself in a career sense is because I could have this really wonderful plan, but maybe if I don't plan something to an exact point, I could be surprised with an opportunity or a job, something just bigger than I could have planned ever or ever could have come up with. And I think that's really cool to think about. So, even that instance of, like I said, I got to move and do that, that was a really wonderful opportunity. And I got to work on this film called The Atom Project. It just came out actually this month. When you hear this, I don't know, it'll be a couple months since it's been released, but that was just a really different experience from anything I'd ever done in my life. So that all kind of leads into my next point of learning about what is productive for you versus what is deemed productive for you. So I just spent a lot of time talking a lot about like what works for me versus what works for other people. And a lot of the time I've learned what works for other people does not work for me. I've heard a lot of people around me say that there are certain things that people need to do to be productive. And while I may agree with some habits or tips to being productive and maybe not necessarily distracted, I disagree with a lot. The big thing being that 1 or 3 or 5 year plan, like that does not work for me. If I planned for all of the things that I thought I should do in a specific order, then I may not be able to experiment and explore with so many things. That's just my take on it. I have like a thing that could be called a go forward plan, which I learned about, and I just feel really grateful to have learned about that because it's similar to that plan, I guess, if, in a way, but not because it looks at what I'm doing right now and how I'm gaining skills that could be transferred over to a number of things rather than one specific trajectory. So, through exploring different career options, learning about other career possibilities through those options, and then also thinking about what you like versus what you don't like is a very important thing. And a lot of learning in what's productive for you versus what society says is productive for you is just so much of everything I just mentioned. So, what works for you and what doesn't. Because at the end of the day, not everything that works for someone else is going to work for you, and vice versa. Just very much like I've talked about this entire episode. And know this too, along the way, you will make mistakes. You could trip up. You could feel lost. You could question everything. And this is totally normal, regardless of what anyone else says about that. It is totally acceptable. I mean, just think of it this way. You could know what you want to do, but you never know what tomorrow will bring. So, with that in mind, how could someone else's judgment or thoughts be more important than your own? Ultimately, when you make a decision, this affects you and not really anyone else. So, you have to choose wisely, and whatever that process withholds for you is what's meant for you. So, the last major thing I really want to touch on is burnout. I think it's something I could do an entire episode on, to be honest, because it's part of so much in our life, but specifically productivity, and in the sense that I'm covering it, especially. I think the biggest thing that bothers me about this hustle culture type of crap is that no one talks about what happens when their social media runs out or when their energy runs out. No one shares that they need a period of recharging. And recharging looks so different for everyone else. So some people need sleep, some people need exercise, some people need to write, some need fresh air. There's a million different things that we could utilize as a way to unwind and recharge. Since this boss lifestyle doesn't talk about rest, and if anything, doesn't mention anything about it, I feel like this is a huge thing I need to mention. And clearly explains why I feel a number of ways about that whole video I mentioned as an example in the beginning. In the last year, I've taken a chunk of time out to rest to help myself recharge. And I know that probably sounds insane, but I did that to help myself recharge, to learn more about myself, and I can thankfully say that I had the opportunity to do that, and it has been insanely beneficial for me. So at times, as I work on a few projects, I still do feel sometimes a little burnt out. It still happens and it can still creep up. But the biggest thing is if you don't address it when it's happening, it can worsen. How I can feel better and recharge is still something that I'm learning every day. And I think that's something that a lot of us learn throughout the entirety of our lives. So far, though, I know working out or watching something or reading all help me feel better. So I'm still learning how to combat it and am still also recharging, but it's a natural part of life. So I guess in some ways I just gotta kind of embrace it. I say that so quietly. I'm like, I gotta embrace it. I don't know about that. But like I've pushed through burnout before and kept moving, and I can honestly say it made it so much worse. So I think I should really emphasize that as important as it is to work and succeed and achieve your goals, don't ever forget to feed yourself and sleep and get fresh air and enjoy parts of life too, because even if things are moving quickly, there's still a second you can always just stop and breathe. Just time goes so quickly. You guys, I'm 25 and I'm turning 26 this year, and every time I think of that, I actually regurgitate a little. Very dramatic, I know, but wow, it's like a daunting thought. And I know it's still a young age, but it still hits me pretty hard. And I've spent a lot of time already very distracted by all the things I could do or should do in comparison to life online. And I've realized that this just isn't a way I want to live my life. So I think that's a good note to end this episode with. If you've listened to all of this, I really hope you enjoyed it and I appreciate you a lot. And I'd love to know if you found any of this content or like the concepts I'm talking about or subject matter, whatever. I want to know if you found any of it relatable. And if you want to hear anything else related to the subject, please, please, please let me know. I'd love to talk more about it. If you want to share anything or have any questions, feel free to shoot a message over on Instagram at the Trying Times Podcast, because I will be reading through those and would love to hear what you guys think. And yeah, so that's it. Rambling session is done. Phone call is over pretty much. I hope to hear from you though, and we'll chat soon, okay? Bye.